I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. We're here on another Monday, and we've got some questions for you. Our first one comes off of Facebook. Justin Berry asks, how about some talk on a 22 long rifle training rifle, the pros and cons? Well, Justin, we've actually got a lot of questions about 22 training rifles, and there are a couple of different ways to look at them. Let's talk about the rifle that's in front of me right now. This is a Savage Mark II BTVS. Now, the BTVS is just Savage's way of denoting that this is a laminated thumb hole stock and a stainless barrel in action. The Savage Mark II series of rifles is a very affordable way to get into a 22 trainer. Now, I chose to bring this rifle out here and show it to you because of the affordability of this package. I do have a Remington 40XB 22 rifle, but it is considerably more expensive to get into those, and there are some drawbacks to that package that I'll talk about in just a second. Now, the main purpose behind a 22 training rifle is your ability to actually get live fire training time on the range for a fraction of the cost that you would spend on ammunition to feed your centerfire rifle. No matter if it's a 223 or a 308, 260, what have you, the 22 long rifle is going to be considerably cheaper. Now, we need to talk about how we intend to train with the 22 training rifle, because it is a little bit different. You're not really going to take this rifle out and bang steel out to 600, 700, 800 yards with it. So how do we get the most out of a 22 trainer? What I generally use a 22 rifle for is training at 50 and 25 yards, and I use it for precision training. I want to make sure that I'm executing the fundamentals of marksmanship precisely, and I'm doing so time and time and time again. And the 22 allows me to grade what I'm doing in dry fire practice. Dry fire practice, you can lay down in your living room, you can look through your scope, and you can observe what the reticle is doing every time you press the trigger. But sometimes you can fool yourself into thinking you're doing well when you may actually be messing up your trigger press, or you may be pushing the rifle one way or the other. When you get on the range with the 22, it's going to punch a hole in the paper where that reticle was, and you're going to know if you were good to go or if you weren't. So it's nice to actually have a scorecard when you're done to show you if your dry fire training has been effective. And again, you do so with a fraction of the price of what you would with a centerfire rifle. Now, because most of the 22 training that I do is at 50 or 25 yards, that's really something you can do just about anywhere. I could take this rifle and go to an indoor range and practice offhand shooting or barricade shooting on an indoor range at closer distances and not have to worry about, either the excessive noise causing problems inside the range or the backstop not being rated for a centerfire rifle, those kind of issues. So it has an excellent place for those of you that may not have a extended range or a long range near you. I know some of you guys are in parts of the country where you have to drive several hours to be able to get out anywhere past 100 yards. So there, the 22 is an excellent, excellent training tool. Now, I say I like to practice with the 22 at 50 and 25 yards because at that distance, the wind is having a minimal impact on the 22 bullet. When we shoot these rifles, we're using 22 match ammunition. 22 match is generally subsonic, and you're shooting a really ballistically handicapped bullet. They're not very well streamlined. They tend to fly like bricks, so the wind can really start moving them around once you get out to a certain distance. However, this can be an advantage to you. If you have access to a 300-yard range and you want to get out and you want to do some wind calls, then you'll find that many times the wind call that you have to make, or the wind adjustment that you have to make at 300 yards with a 22, is very similar to the wind adjustment you would have to make in the 800 to 1,000-yard range with a 308. Of course, this is dependent upon the bullet and the speed that you're shooting it at with your 308. But you can look at the ballistic tables and you can figure out comparable distances to where you would have to make the same wind call with this rifle as you would with your full-size rifle. So again, if you're limited to say only a 300-yard range, then you can do some really good wind training with a .22 rifle versus what you would be able to get with a centerfire rifle, because 300 yards for a .308 really isn't getting into any real wind drift. So again, yet another great way to train with this. Now, there are some drawbacks to .22 trainers. The main drawback being the recoil with this system is not what you would get with a .308. So if you're shooting for instance from a barricade position where you want to really make sure you get that good solid position to be able to drive the rifle through recoil, well, this isn't really going to help you a whole lot with that. It will help you with getting a stable position and getting it set up, but it won't tell you if your position will survive through recoil of the system. It is a great choice for shooting in an offhand position. If you're trying to get used to shooting slung, standing, well, this is good because even the tightest position, slung standing, is not going to survive the recoil of a .308. You're going to jump off target when you fire it. There's just really no way around that. I've shot heavy match rifles with brakes on them, and you're still going to be thrown off target when you press the trigger. It's all about getting that nice tight position so you can come back down out of recoil and get back on target. But this is an inexpensive way to move into shooting offhand. Another drawback of the system is the bolt throw. When you look at the bolt throw on a .22, it is very, very short. It's really only a half to a third of what you would get with the centerfire rifle. So you really want to stay away from any rapid bolt manipulation drills. You really don't want to go through rapid bolt shots with this kind of trainer, because what you'll end up doing is you'll train yourself for that really short throw, and then when you're running the full-size rifle, you'll short stroke it. You won't bring the bolt back far enough to either eject the spent round, or you won't bring it far enough to chamber a fresh round. On most bolt-action rifles, if you don't run that bolt all the way back to the hard stop, then the bolt won't come back far enough to engage the case head, and you won't strip the next round from the magazine. So when you're using these rifles, you want to make sure that you are doing a very deliberate bolt throw, and you're making sure that you pull it back and contact that hard stop before you drive it forward again. Don't get in the habit of just quickly running it back and forth. Now, the advantage of a rifle like the Mark II BTVS is that it does have the ability to accept a 5 or 10 round magazine versus my very expensive Remington 40XB that is a single shot. Now, the single shot rifle has its place. It's a very accurate rifle, and if you're shooting from prone or shooting from the bench and you're doing very slow fire type drills, then it's not a big deal at all. However, if you're going to practice transitioning from target to target to target and rebuilding your position each time, then this is a better option because you can cycle the bolt, slide over to your next target, and engage. Additionally, if you're shooting from different positions, then this is a better option because single feeding from either a box or a belt pouch or something is rather annoying when you're trying to work barricade positions or standing offhand, those kind of things. So the magazine is a nice thing to have. Overall, a lot of guys get kind of wrapped up into setting up their .22 trainers exactly like their centerfire rifles. If you have the ability to do that and you have the budget, that is the gold standard. That's the best thing to do, to have your .22 as an exact duplicate of your centerfire rifle. Because the reality of what we're trying to do is we're trying to translate these skills over to the centerfire rifle, or use this rifle to verify dry fire training that we've done on the centerfire rifle. So since we're switching back between the two, we want it to be as close as possible. However, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good to have to drop $5,000 to $6,000 on a .22 trainer to match your centerfire rifle. You're then getting away from the budget, and you're getting away from a whole lot of ammo that you could have put down range through the main system. So what I suggest is try to keep the type and the general form of the rifle similar between the two. If you mainly shoot an AR-10 or an LR-308, then you really don't want to go with one of these as your trainer rifle. It would be better off to go with one of the AR-22 conversions. If you shoot some other form of semi-automatic rifle, then you may want to go with something like a 10-22 that will give you a semi-automatic function. If you shoot a bolt gun that has a traditional stock, then you'll want to pick up a 22 trainer that has a traditional stock. I chose this rifle here because at the time that I purchased this, my main rifle was the Accuracy International AE Mark II, which has a thumb hole stock. The fact that this has a thumb hole stock and that has a thumb hole stock keeps me from cheating when I'm shooting it, because I have to bring my thumb out each time when I either go run the bolt or manipulate the safety. So the fact that this has a thumb hole and that has a thumb hole translates well. When we come down to the trigger, the AE Mark II has a two-stage trigger. This has an AccuTrigger. Now the AccuTrigger is not really a two-stage trigger. It just kind of has a safety feature in here. But in function, it works very similar. There's a take up where my finger presses back the blade, and then there's a hard stop, and the continuation of the press after that causes the rifle to fire. So in my mind, the manipulation is the same. The safety is up here on the side where it is on the AE Mark II. It's on the bolt shroud. Here it's right next to the bolt shroud, so that's not really that big of a switch over it. It functions in the same way, forward to fire, to the rear safe. Although a 22 trainer allows you to save money on ammunition, you don't want to feed it cheap ammunition. You want to stick with match ammunition. If you take one of these and you try to feed it something like Federal bulk pack ammunition, your shots are going to be all over the place at 50 to 100 yards. It's really going to be difficult to determine if the stray shot was because of the inconsistency of the ammunition, or if it was because of an inconsistency in your position, your trigger pull, your sight alignment, etc. So stick with match ammunition. It's a little bit more expensive, but if you buy it in bulk, then the cost is really negligible between that and bulk pack. Now, another word on ammunition. 22s are very, very picky on ammunition. So what you'll want to do when you select a 22 rifle is you'll want to pick a small quantity of each type of match ammunition that is available to you, and you'll want to test it in that rifle. 22 match ammunition is generally a lead bullet that has some kind of wax lubricant on it. So when you fire your lots through the rifle to test them, you're going to make sure between each lot you take some time and you pull a patch or two through it to try to get the bulk of that lubricant out, and then fire some fouling rounds with your next group before you shoot for score. So that way you're getting out the old lubricant, you're laying down the new lubricant, and that's not going to give you any cross-contamination between the lots of ammunition. Don't be surprised if you and your buddy end up with the same rifles and each rifle likes a different type of ammunition. That's just the name of the game. For some reason, that's the way it works with 22s. I haven't figured it out. I'm not that big of a 22 bench rest guy, but that tends to be the facts of the system. Now, let's talk about scopes real quick. The scope that I have on here is a very cheap scope. Mainly because I don't do a lot of dialing up and down for it. The scope is good enough to hold the zero from range session to range session, and that is really what I need on this scope, because if I'm going to shoot at a different distance, I have time to re-zero it and then lock that system in. Ideally, I would love to put a high-end scope on this rifle, but recently I have not been getting a whole lot of use out of this rifle. I've been doing more dry fire than I have 22 training, so it doesn't make sense for me to spend a lot of money on it. However, in a perfect world, I would put the same scope on this rifle that I put on my competition rifle. There is one factor that you want to keep in mind for that, though. If you're trying to set up a problem where the target looks the same through your trainer as it does through your centerfire rifle at ballistically equivalent distances, that means distances that you're getting the same drop and the same wind call, then instead of going with a first focal plane scope, this is one place where a second focal plane scope may be better for you. The reason being, you can adjust how the target looks in relation to the crosshair by adjusting the magnification on the scope. You can see this anytime you get behind a second focal plane scope and you turn the magnification ring. The crosshair stays the same size in relation to your eye, but the target will appear to grow or shrink behind the crosshair. This allows you to set it up so that say you're shooting a 300-yard target, but you want it to feel like you're shooting a 1,000-yard target. Then you can adjust the magnification and the reticle to correspond to how that target would appear at 1,000 yards. This starts to get into the more finer points. If you don't really understand that concept, then I'd say stick with the same kind of scope on the trainer as you have on your centerfire rifle. If you're on a budget, put whatever you can put on there that is going to be a good quality scope that will retain zero. You don't want to take this out every time and have to worry about why is it not shooting and re-zero it. You also don't want to go through a box and a half of ammo only to figure out your scope's broken and that's why your zero is moving around all over the place. Finally, you will want a scope that has adjustable parallax, either an adjustable objective or side focus, and you'll want that to go below 50 yards. That is one thing that you start to have problems finding in some of the cheaper scopes. This is where we start to get into the 22 and the airgun specific scopes because they're designed to be used at a shorter range. So we're really not worried about massive amounts of magnification, but we do want that scope to focus down at relatively close ranges. I'd say if it focuses to 25, you're fine. If it focuses to 50, you're going to be kind of on the edge there because depending upon the quality of the scope, they may have focused that at a real 50 or it may actually be focused at 75 yards. So keep that in mind, but you will definitely want an adjustable objective or a side focus scope. Overall, I really love shooting 22s. A 22 rifle like this is valuable both for your training and for getting new shooters into the sport. It's really kind of intimidating for a new shooter to take them and throw them behind a 308 tactical rifle to really start out with. Unless they know what they're doing and you are a good instructor teaching them how to get on the rifle correctly, it can be a really bad experience for them right off the bat. I've seen a lot of folks jump on rifles where someone didn't instruct them properly. They get too close to that ocular bell. They get scope bit. They don't get the buttstock right into the pocket and pulled in tight and it slaps them. Just all kinds of ugly stuff. So it's really nice to be able to start a new shooter out on a 22, demonstrate to them the fundamentals of marksmanship, how to adjust the scope, how to run the bolt, how to safely load and unload the rifle and safely handle the rifle. Then once we get that down and they're comfortable behind a rifle, they're comfortable pulling a trigger and hitting a target, then you can introduce them to some heavier recoiling rifles and explain to them how the recoil is going to feel and how they need to go about adjusting to it. Don't ever, ever, ever put somebody behind a rifle that's going to kick the crap out of them just for some grins. It's unsafe, it does them a disservice, and it hurts our sport. Don't do it. Especially, don't do it to the women in your life. It's not funny. It makes you look like an ass. So a 22 trainer is great. Again, speaking about women, if you have that significant other that you would like to take to the range and get her started, this is a great way. Generally, these rifles are lighter than their centerfire equivalents, so it's easier for smaller body women and smaller body men out there to handle. It's easier for them to operate. It generally takes less force to operate the bolt, and some of these rifles are designed with smaller ergonomics in mind because they're more geared towards youth shooters. So they'll be a little bit easier for females with smaller hands to operate well. So that's something to think about. I generally like 22 rifles and always keep 22 rifles in stock because I can take young shooters out and get them started, and they absolutely love shooting these. I try to start young shooters out on iron sights to get them going. But if you have a shooter that maybe has a physical handicap, has some eye problems, is not able to properly utilize iron sights, then a scoped rifle gets them in the game, it gets them going, and it instills the love of shooting in them that they'll carry with them for the rest of their life. So 22s are great. Most of the people I know, we started out on 22 rifles when we were little. It was the next thing up from BB guns. It was the first real gun that we ever got, and I've killed my fair share of rabbits with 22s. So they are very, very nice to keep around. They are great. They do have a purpose even for professional marksmen to train on. In the Marine Corps Scout Sniper Basic School, the first rifle that you touch in that school is a 22 trainer. They'll start you out on the 22 before they ever give you an M40. So even in the professional arena, 22 trainers are a valuable tool. The Savage Mark II is a great rifle to look at. There are a bunch of other ones out there. I haven't gone through all the 22 trainers yet. Savage Mark IIs are gaining popularity. There are some aftermarket accessories for them. There are several different models out there. Some even come with threaded muzzles, so if you have a 22 suppressor, you can already install it. Some come with tactical style stocks already installed. So those are great options if you have something like a Macmillan or a Manor stock on your main rifle. Then you can get a Savage Mark II that very closely replicates the grip angle and the stock length and the comb. Now, if you have a semi-automatic rifle, as I said, a 1022 is a great choice because 1022s you can set up however you could possibly imagine. There's just about every accessory that you can think of for a 1022 out there. For semi-automatic rifles like a GAP 10, a POF, AR-10, LR-308, etc., tons of AR-15 22 trainers that you can just drop on a regular AR-15 lower, or you can now get full 22 long rifle clones of AR-15s, such as those from Smith & Wesson, Remington, etc. A bunch of different companies make them out there, so those are available. So those are some options to think about. Really, what you can do with 22 trainers is only limited by your imagination. You can do dot drills, you can do transition drills, barricade drills, offhand, slung supported, unsupported, just about anything. They are great rifles just to go out and shoot. You can burn through hundreds of rounds of ammo for just a few bucks. It's really a nice option to have. Now our next question comes from Chris. Chris writes, how about how to properly use a data book? Outside of round count and target pages, I'm pretty lost as to what's important, or how to interpret the information. Well, Chris, I've got two different data books here in front of me, and we'll go over how they work in shooting and what really the important information is. Now, first I'm going to go over the Impact Modular Data Book. The Impact Data Book is a fairly large-sized data book, and it allows you to put in pages that you want and take out pages that you don't use. This is really important to me because I have in the past had spiral-bound data books that really I fill up all the good pages, the pages that are pertinent to what I do, and then I'll have a lot of pages in there that I really don't use. The design of the Impact Data Books allows you to put in whatever pages you want. You can in fact buy a pre-made data book to start out with that has a wide selection of pages, and then as you use it you'll notice which pages that you use up the most, and you can reorder just those pages to refill the book, and then you can pull out the ones that you don't use and you can kick them to the curb. Additionally, as you fill up pages, you can pull the really old pages out and you can archive them, and you can keep the more recent pages in, so you're not filling up the whole book and having to chuck the whole book. You can keep what information you want in, and you can get out the old information that is no longer necessary for what you're doing at that time. Now, some of the pages that the data book comes with, just general shooter information pages, logging in stuff about you, your gun. It's got quite a few different ballistic charts, some formulas. It's really a good amount of information if you're a beginning shooter and you want to read through that kind of stuff, or you want cheat sheets to take with you in the field. There are some wind observation method pages. Tony over at Impact Data Books has really gone through a whole lot of effort to make sure that there is a ton of information loaded in this book, and you get a ton of value out of it. You're almost buying a abbreviated sniper manual when you pick up one of these data books. Now, once we get through all this stuff, we get into the pages that I really like. First one, you have just a standard target page here. It's got a circular target. There are several different varieties with different shaped targets. There are actually also pages that have just blank targets in them, so you can draw whatever target shape in you use. But as we come along here, we have all our information for our atmospheric variables, which that's very important to write in what the atmosphere is, and you want to make sure that you have the atmosphere at your point. A lot of guys will get on Weather Channel or whatever their local news network is, and they'll write down the information that the news gives them or that website gives them. Very often, that information is good for the location that they're pulling from. For instance, the Weather Channel very frequently pulls from the closest weather station to your area, which may be your local airport. If your local airport is 20 miles away from the position you're going to be shooting at, there may be a difference in the environmental conditions at where you're shooting at. So if at all possible, you're going to want to use something like a Kestrel weather meter that will tell you what the environmental conditions are exactly at your location to log them in. If you don't have a wind meter, cheat, see if there's somebody else that can pull you the information off of theirs. However, if that's not possible, then write down the closest thing you got. If you've got a weather station within 20 miles of you, that may be all you have to roll with on that day. But the more accurate data you're writing in, the more it will benefit you later on. So we basically going across the boxes here, we have time, location, ammo type, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, altitude, and angle. The three that you really want to pay attention to are temperature, barometric pressure, and altitude. Now what I do is I ignore the altitude and I do what's called station pressure. If you have a Kestrel, then what you'll do is you'll zero out the reference altitude so that it thinks everywhere you're at is zero altitude, and it will read off what the station pressure is instead of the barometric pressure. And we don't care if it's barometric pressure or station pressure. All we care about is the density of the air that the bullet has to travel through. So by zeroing out the altitude and using station pressure instead of barometric pressure, I'm just taking one factor out. So whichever you use, barometric pressure or station pressure, make sure you log that in. So if you're not using barometric, make some note here that says you're using station pressure instead. So later on, if you change the way you do things, you don't trip yourself up. Now the important stuff is down here. In each one of these blocks, it gives you, each block corresponds to one shot. It allows you to write in what your elevation and your windage call was for that shot. And then you're going to plot in the first box what your call was. Now your call is very, very important. A call is the last place that those sights were when the rifle fired. You don't care about where the bullet impacted at that point. You just care about where the sights were aligned when the rifle fires. Lots of guys will lie to themselves about calls. They'll wait until the bullet goes downrange and impacts the target before they make their call. That's not how it works. The call is the truth of where the sights were aligned when the rifle fired. So plot your call. So if the sights were dead center on the target, then that's where you're going to plot the shot. If the sights were to the left, that's where you're going to plot it. If they were totally off the target, if you sneezed when you pulled the trigger and the sights were completely off target when it fired, that's where you're going to plot that shot. Now you can call that it was a bad shot. I did something stupid, the sights were off the target when I fired. That's fine. Now once you've called your shot, you're going to look down range at where the shot impacted, and then you're going to mark on your target where the impact was and number it so it corresponds with the call. What this will tell you is if you call the shot as a perfect shot, dead on, I did everything right, the crosshairs were in the center of the target when it broke, and your bullet impacts high, well, you know you're going to need to make an elevation correction. If it impacts left or right, you know you're going to have to take a look at your wind call. So that will allow you to know that it was a good shot, but something's amiss and I need to fix it. If you're consistently calling that the crosshairs to the right every time you break, well, now you need to figure out why you're throwing the shot to the right every time. The call is really important, And it may take you a little while to get used to watching where the crosshairs are when the rifle recoils. If you're not able to watch where the crosshairs are when the rifle recoils, then you may be developing a flinch, and it may be something that you either need to do some ball and dummy drills or you need to dry fire some more to try to resolve. So keep that in mind. You want to try to call every single shot that you fire. Now, where this translates over into competition shooting is if I'm shooting steel at extended ranges, say 800, 900 yards, I want to be able to watch where that crosshair is when I break the trigger, and I will know if that was a good shot or a bad shot. If I screw up, say the bipod slips or something happens and I dump the shot, then that call is going to tell me that that was a bad shot, and it tells me I need to send another round downrange now. I don't need to wait and watch for the splash downrange because it's going to be a bad shot. So instead of waiting for that time of flight to expire and the round to impact the target, I can go ahead and get another round in the air, and then I've saved myself a couple of seconds. A couple of seconds may mean the difference between getting that last shot off or ending with rounds still in the magazine and no points on the board. So it really is an important training tool, and it's an important tool in competition. Now, there are a lot of different formats of pages in here. I can't go through every page format in the Impact Databooks, but if you go on their website, you can take a look and see what all the different pages they have. There are two other pages that I am going to talk about real quick. One is their cold bore pages. For professional shooters, law enforcement, snipers, cold bore pages are very, very nice because you can go in here and you can have in one spot document a day-to-day different shot. This was really important for me when I was diagnosing a cold bore issue with a rifle because I could go down and input all the information and I could see if the cold bore was dead on consecutive days, but then if I let a couple of days pass, if the cold bore drifted, there are spots to mark if it's a cold bore or if it's a cold clean bore shot, which does make a difference. So this is great because it gives you one spot to log all that information. And boys and girls in law enforcement, this stuff is discoverable. So if it ever goes to the inside of a courtroom, they can subpoena your data book, and it's nice to be able to show, because in law enforcement, your cold bore shot may be the only shot you get. It's nice to be able to show a jury that, hey, we do take this serious enough that we are documenting it, and this is how my rifle performed on each day. Now, as a civilian shooter, as a regular precision rifle shooter, this is still very important information. Why waste that first shot of the day? Make sure you get downrange, make sure you document it. There are stages in competition that require a cold bore shot because cold bore and cold shooter is the gold standard. If you can perform on command with the first bullet out of the magazine, first bullet through the bore of the day, then that definitely goes to show your skill as a shooter. So it's really nice to be able to log that information. Now, the final Impact Data Book page that I want to talk about is the Shooter Diary page. Now, the Shooter Diary page is pretty much the one that I use the most. Now, up here at the top, you've got your regular environmental data, room to write what scope and what rifle, and then make your win calls down here. But I really like that it has this nice free-form lined area here for notes. This is really what I use for the most during competitions because I can just write in what the stage number was, write in what the stage was, and how I performed on the stage, what needed to change, what I did good. And I just really have the freedom to write in whatever I need to write in. Now, you do still have a gridded area over here that you can write in target shapes, draw target shapes, impacts, whatever, or you can use this as a little mini field card if you need, and you can sketch out target locations and target distances. Whatever it is you want. You also, of course, have the ability to write in what your dope was for each of the different shots that you made. But it's just really nice to have a free-form area to write that stuff in and to be able to keep all your information from one shoot on one page. That way you're not flipping back and forth through a whole bunch of different pages. As I said, that is the one that I use the most. Now, of course, you have a wide variety of different pages you can choose from. You have field sketches, range cards, and of course you can do the regular round count log in here as well. I generally, though, don't suggest you do a round count log in your data book, especially if you have several different rifles that you shoot with. I prefer to have one data book that I'll use across a variety of different rifles, and then keep separate round count books for each individual rifle. I don't really feel the need to take a round count book for a rifle out into the field. I can generally leave them in the safe, and if I need to, at the end of my data book sheet for the day, I can write how many rounds that I fired, or I can look back and see how many rounds I fired for that stage, and then I'll write that in the round count book when the day's done and I'm over with. That is the impact data book. Now over here, Mark over at Storm Tactical was nice enough to send us one of his new pocket data books. Now this is a real neat, compact little guy. It's spiral bound, and it really is designed specifically by Mark and by a couple other Marine snipers to be able to fit in the blouse pocket of Marine Corps BDUs. The intent is to give you a nice compact book that you can carry with you anywhere you go. The one that I have right here is regular paper. They also have Write and Rain versions, so if it gets a little damp, it's not going to destroy the book. Even with Write and Rain paper, though, I for some reason still like to stick them in a Ziploc bag to keep them a little bit more protected. Mud still causes problems when it gets caked on these pages and whatnot, so keeping a Ziploc bag still works a little bit better. The Write and Rain paper, though, is nice so that you can use a ballpoint pen and you can write on the stuff when you got a nice little drizzle coming down, and it won't destroy the paper. Now, the pocket data book, you give up a little bit to get the form factor. You really don't have as much room to write things like free-form notes or like the field sketches or range cards. But what you do have here is you have room to write in your drop table. So you can go out and you can write in your environmental variables for the day, and you can write in what wind and what elevation settings you were using for the different yardages. It's broken down into 25 yard or 25 meter increments, depending upon which you circle and which you're using. So you can log all that information in there. And it goes from 100 to 1,000, and then it's got a really little notes field next to it. There are quite a few of those pages in here, and those are actually really nice to use. That's actually what I would see this being used for the majority of the time. You do still have target pages where you've got a target shape here, and then you've got plot and call boxes, so you can write in your elevation and windage settings and then call your shot and then plot your shot down here and write your final dope in. So you've got those, and then finally you have a couple of information pages in the back for different range estimation formulas, different mill relation formulas here, and then of course you have a freeform notes area in the back. Now they only offer a couple of pages for the freeform notes. Judging by the size of this book, I would really suggest carrying another small Write and Rain notebook that is specifically for note taking. If you have to do something like comm logs or field notes or anything of that nature, use a separate book for that. That way you can tear that stuff out and you can turn it in if you need to turn it in, or you can retain it, but you're not filling up your data book with just regular field notes or observation logs. This is a really nice deal if you just want something compact to put in a stock pack, put in a BDU pocket, or to carry with you wherever you go. Now the target shapes for both the Storm Tactical book, you can go on Storm Tactical's website and print out targets that correspond to those pages. The same thing for the impact data books. Any of the targets that are listed in there, you can go on their website and you can print out paper targets with your printer to go staple up. That's a really nice feature that I like that data book manufacturers are doing nowadays, so that I can go get targets that exactly correspond to the grids that are on the data book pages or to the shapes that are on the data book pages. Both companies also have some neat targets for different drills So go on their websites and check them out. We'll go ahead and leave the information down in the description box, links on how to get to Impact Databooks and Storm Tactical. Both are great supporters of the shooting community, and both guys are former Marines, so definitely a shout out to them. We like to support Marines and our veterans in general. So if you have any questions on the Impact Databooks, the Storm Tactical Databooks, or 22 trainers, go ahead and leave them in the comments section below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you've liked this episode, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you're a subscriber, thank you very much. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. It helps us out, and YouTube will let you know when we release new videos. Until next time, no matter if it's a 22 trainer or a full-size centerfire rifle, get out and shoot!